Welcome back, and we are set to go green here on NASCAR Life in the Fast Lane on WagerTalk TV as we get set to preview the Kansas race this Sunday, May 2nd. Before that, of course, we're going to recap last week's Talladega race. But before I do that, as always, I've got to bring in my two experts here at WagerTalk.com and SportsMemo.com. We've got Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com, Rocky Atkinson, SportsMemo.com. I'm, of course, Steve Merril, also at WagerTalk.com. And going to get to that Kansas race here in a few minutes with some free picks, some handicapping advice, some play-on drivers, some drivers to avoid, some long shots as well. But first, Rocky Atkinson, SportsMemo.com. Let me bring you in. Give me a quick recap of Talladega. We had another exciting finish, as we often do at those restrictor plate tracks last weekend. I know you kind of stay away from the Talladega races. Did you put anything out for free on Twitter at Rocketman Sports? And any other thoughts about the restrictor plate race in Alabama last week?
I did. We had our ninth different winner in 10 races this year as Brad Keselowski took home to win in overtime. Another exciting race there in Talladega. Seems like at the end of each stage, something was happening with cars spinning and wrecking. Although we had several wrecks, I didn't feel like we saw the big one, though, in this race. You know, usually 20-plus cars involved in the big one. Matt DiBenedetto, he won stage one. Bubba Wallace won stage two. William Byron ran strong again, finishing second. Got his 8th top 10 finish in 10 races this year. If we take a look at the playoff standings, 3 guys still without a win are 3 of the top guys from last year. Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, and defending champion Chase Elliott sitting outside that top 10. I won my free head-to-head matchup here on the show with Eric Almirola over Bubba Wallace. Cashed my members play, Michael McDowell over Cole Custer. Also went 4-1 with my free leans on Twitter. My only loss was Eric Jones over Cole Custer, and he lost on the final lap in overtime as he spun out. My official free play released on the site was Joey Logano over Kyle Larson, another winner, pushing my official free plays to 26-9, 74% my last 35. Also, after that 1-0 performance, I'm now 99-60, 62% the past 4 years with all my NASCAR picks.
Well, this is a great time to get on board for Rockies. He's going to have winner number 100, I think, this weekend at Kansas. So once again, sportsmemo.com as Rocky gets winner number 100 in NASCAR for the past several seasons here and sitting over 60% over the last 3 years on those best bets. We take it easy on the restrictor plate tracks, Andy Lang, but Kansas here is a cookie cutter we're going to get to in a few moments, which is great from a handicapping perspective. Keselowski wins, of course. Logano was strong for the majority of the race. Blaney was up there also. They were running 1, 2, 3 at times. He fell back at the point. Larson finished dead last, was out after a couple laps, actually. So that helped that free head-to-head for Rocky. I was never in doubt. Larson will be back in the mix this week at Kansas for sure. Andy, I know you stay away from these restrictor plate tracks, but did you see anything at Talladega that can transfer maybe to the Daytona race later this summer or the Talladega race this fall that we can use?
No. Back to you, Steve. No, just, Brad, I call him the ninja. There he is, gets a win. How many laps did he lead? 1. So, he's so good at that. He's the best. He's becoming the best at sneaking in at the end, keeping his car clean. And he's done it on short tracks, on cookie cutters, on restrictor plate tracks. It's pretty cool to watch, and it's not a fluke anymore. He's been doing this time and time again, so I thought that was cool. No losses for me in head-to-heads. No wins either because I didn't have any last week. So, but these are I tell people these are the ones to follow our plays on. The cookie cutters are the best. I don't want to say the easiest to handicap, but there's less uncertainty, less cautions, and there's a lot of information to go on. So if you're on the fence about following NASCAR plays, this is a week to jump on board.
Yeah, it's really a great time to jump on board for the season, actually, because we have a lot of these intermediate speedways coming up. We got the short tracks with Bristol, Martinsville, and Richmond out of the way this past month. Some of those, by the way, have great wagering opportunities, but they're kind of gone. We've got 2 of the 4 restrictor plates out of the way. We've got a lot of these 1 to 2 mile tracks coming up over the next several months. This is the cream of the NASCAR season as far as making money, in my opinion. And Rocky's about to hit winner number 100 in the past 3 years here and has head-to-head best bets, sportsmemo.com. Andy Lang hit right below, I believe, 70% last year, Andy, at WagerTalk.com on your NASCAR best bets. Andy, of course, covers golf as well. He is the prop expert, whether it be NHL, NBA, MLB. Rocky, of course, basketball and baseball best bets as well. I also have baseball and basketball best bets at WagerTalk.com. And don't forget our Twitter handles. Andy is at Bump Sports. Rocky is at Rocketman Sports. And I'm at Steve Merril, 2 R's, 1 L on Twitter. Hey, guys, before we leave Talladega in the rearview mirror, pun intended, let's look at some of the nominees real quick for the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Award, the Unforced Error Award. Also, you could almost say kind of the entertaining aspects of the race, because one of the nominees I put out there was 1990s tag team duo, a hip-hop duo tag team doing the Gentleman Start Your Engines. And I actually was not at, when the race started, I was actually out. So Andy had tweeted, had messaged me and Rocky this. And I was laughing as I read the message, went back and watched it on the replay as I do for the race so I could take notes. And first of all, a couple takeaways on that real quickly, Andy. First of all, surprisingly, they were available. And second of all, they actually did a very good job when I went back and watched it. It was actually one of the better ones this season. It was pre-recorded, but it was still solid. Pre-race, something we got to point out, every Toyota car except Kyle Busch failed the inspection for unapproved adjustments and went to the rear. Something to keep an eye on. Every Toyota car except for Kyle Busch. Kyle Larson out early, as we mentioned earlier, finished dead last 40th. Harrison Burton, lap 28. Keep in mind, Jeb Burton wins the Talladega race on Saturday in the Xfinity race. Harrison Burton leaves the pit with the gas can attached and is literally driving back onto the track with a gas can taken out, which is pretty entertaining. Joey Gass in lap 40, he has a Davey Allison 28 car tribute, and he's basically out of the race and crashes, but they're able to talk about the car because he causes the caution. I thought that was well planned. Into stage one, Denny Hamlin, 4th place, and basically he gets in a wreck with Logano, and Stenhouse was somewhat involved in that. Middle of stage 2, Hamlin, second pit speeding penalty, really kind of took him out of contention for a guy that's been dominant on these tracks. As Rocky said, Hamlin has still not won this year, and he's been by far as dominant as any car we've seen in recent history at this point of the season, but 2 pit road speeding penalties. Kurt Busch, engine fire, late stage 2. Into stage 2, Hamlin again with Truex in a crash. Truex had actually been running better than normal at this track. And Ricky Stenhouse, we kind of bring him up. It's his namesake award. He hits the wall trying to get in for his last pit stop, coming too hard. And at the very end of regulation, Truex again, who's not been good on these tracks, but ran well, brings out a caution to basically force overtime. So with all that chaos, Andy Lang, what from the smoke, the fire, who did you have as this week's winner for the Ricky Stenhouse Unforced Error Award at Talladega?
I almost gave it to Stenhouse, but I think we're going to have another opportunity this year to give him one. And Hamlin, I mean, you could just say, Hamlin and all of the Hamlininess that he brought to the race with, mistake after mistake. But I don't think we're going to talk too much about Harrison Burton the rest of the year. Leaving the pits with the gas can. This wasn't like he pulled out and the gas can fell off. This thing was in the car as he was driving onto the track. It looked hilarious. The gas can, they cut over to the gas can guy and he's just standing there. And it's like, yeah, boy, you hate to be a gas can man with no gas can. So tough one, but I got to give it to Harrison Burton. I don't foresee us mentioning him again, and driving off with the gas can is always good for comedy.
So the 96 car gets the Unexpected Stenhouse Award with Harrison Burton driving off the gas can. It was, like you said, it was in there pretty good. That helps fuel mileage. It hurts aerodynamics, and it's also very unsafe for the other drivers on a 200-mile-per-hour track. So Harrison Burton, well-deserved Ricky Stenhouse Award for Talladega. Hey, guys, let's move on to Kansas. I'm excited to talk about this. We got a real handicapable race, in my opinion. This is the 1.5-mile oval speedway. About half of the tracks on the circuit of the 36 races are like this type of track. That's why it's such a great handicapping track, because we have a lot of data and information to go on. Rocky, I'll start with you. The usual suspects do very well here. Last year, Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick dominated the regular season after the restart in May. The main reason is because they were really unstoppable in these cookie cutters. Hamlin, as I just referenced, has been unstoppable this year on all tracks despite not winning. Harvick, though, is a different story, and we've talked about him a lot on this show. Kevin Harvick has not led a lap this year except at Daytona and Talladega, the 2 random restrictor plate tracks. Rocky, I think you've got your H hat on. You're kind of hiding it from us, but it could still be a Hamlin hat, I guess. But you got the H hat. Who's your number one pick, though? And I have a feeling an H will probably be in your top 3 this week. Who's your number one guy, though, at Kansas this weekend?
Probably going to be in the top 3 for sure. What are you talking about? Kevin Harvick. We're going with Mr. Harvick here this week.
Wow, number one?
Number one. Harvick will win his first race.
So he will lead a lap then?
Probably not. He has 3 wins here, 10 top 5 finishes, 17 top 10s, and 30 races here in Kansas. Average finish here is 9.3, which is best among all active drivers. And we keep talking negatively about Harvick, but Harvick is tied with William Byron for the second hottest driver the past 10 races, which is this year, with an average finish of 10.3. Although he hasn't dominated like he did last year, he's not having a terrible season. Don't be surprised if Harvick don't bring home the win this weekend.
Andy, I won't be surprised, but I think there's 2 things we have to separate. That's winning the race and being a good head-to-head play. And I've said from the start that Harvick's still always dangerous in head-to-heads. You know, and Kyle Busch was like that last year. He was constantly getting top 10s, I believe, but never really in that position to win. But yeah, I mean, Rocky, Harvick has owned these tracks over the last 20 years. He owned them last year. But is this a Kyle Busch situation where last year he was always a top 3 or 4 favorite every race and didn't get it done? I mean, I'll ask you quickly, do you have Harvick in your top 3? And then also, who is somebody you have maybe as your number 1 guy this week?
Yeah, Harvick is nowhere near my top 3. I see many drivers more consistent and more dominant. Like Rocky said, his average finish is 10th. It's bad for him. So to say, well, he's gonna go from 10th all the way up to leading a bunch of laps and winning. I mean, any of these guys can win a race if something weird happens at the end, but I got to see it first. Brad and Harvick were really great here in the 2 Atlanta races, but who else was good was Alex Bowman. And at the last 4 races at this track, Alex Bowman has the best average finish of 6th. So you want to talk about somebody that has good track history and is running pretty decent this year. That's probably off of everyone's radar. I would look at Alex Bowman to be a sneaky, real strong guy in head-to-heads, fantasy and daily fantasy as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to gang up on Rocky here because we usually are in agreement for the most part. And like Andy and I both said, I mean, Harvick winning the race would not surprise anybody, but he hasn't shown quite that level that he was at last year. And hey, viewers, I want to hear your thoughts in the chat. Not only in the live chat, but more importantly in the comment section below, as this is archived all weekend on WagerTalk TV. Let us know what you think about Harvick. I want to get some feedback. Give me your top 3 picks as well. Let me know if you're on or against Harvick this week to win, head-to-heads, other options. And Rocky, it's interesting that Andy brought up Alex Bowman because I know that's a guy you faded with success last year. I was on the Bowman bandwagon at the restart in May because he looked really good. Was it the California race? I believe he won in the spring before the shutdown last year, and he dominated that race. That's a 2-mile, bigger track, but still a cookie-cutter 2-mile. So we knew he was fast, but then he just never could get it going like from Charlotte on. However, Rocky, you have pointed out that Bowman looks different this year. And keep in mind, he's now in the 48 car. It's the same team, by the way. It's not the 48 team. It's the 88 team in the 44 car. By the way, the 48 team is Kyle Larson, the 5 car now, and they've been extremely strong. And that might be a name that's coming out sooner than later here in this top 3 segment. But Rocky, I mean, I know you've liked Bowman. He's kind of a play-on guy for you now, and maybe another driver you're looking at as well.
Yeah, Bowman has matured somewhat since last year, in my opinion. I'm not sure if I'm a play on him or play against him this weekend. I'll see who he's matched up with. But another driver I'm looking at is Martin Truex Jr. Truex Jr. has 2 wins here, 9 top 10 finishes, 9 top 5 finishes, 12 top 10 finishes in 25 races here in Kansas. Average finish 13.2 at this track. Truex is the only driver to win 2 races this year. He also has 6 top 10 finishes this season, average finish of 11.2, which is 4th best on the circuit. Look for Martin Truex Jr. to be strong here this weekend.
Yeah, Truex has been as consistent as anybody, Andy, the last 5+ years. Really, since he's been with the Gibbs machines, he's been as good of anyone, if not better, on these type of tracks. He's, of course, a teammate with Denny Hamlin, who we've mentioned has been very strong here as well since last year. And as you said, Rocky, the only repeat winner all season is Truex, which probably surprises a lot of people until you think about it, because he's not exactly like in the first or second name. Hamlin's dominated the season, but Truex has been sneaky fast at a lot of races, very consistent. And he's coming off one of his worst tracks in Talladega last week, where he still actually was running pretty well for the majority of the race. Andy, so Rocky's given us Harvick and Truex. You've given us so far. Who was your first one, my man? Bowman? You say Bowman?
Yeah, Bowman.
Got you. Okay, well, who's somebody else you're looking at here in the top 3?
Well, I went and looked at the last 2 races at Kansas, last 2 at Atlanta, Charlotte, and Texas. And this might surprise everyone. The number one driver there is Ryan Blaney, as far as average finish. So, his average finish is 6.3. I don't think that can be overlooked. I you know, he hasn't shown that he can really win a lot. He shows that he can run up front, and I think that may just come with time. He'll get a win here or there, but he just never quite has seemed to be a threat to win on these big tracks at the end. He's gotten the job done, but when I look at that consistency, I mean, that's not a real small sample size. That's 2 races at 4 different tracks, cookie cutters. And when you're better than Harvick, when you're better than Kyle Busch, Truex, Keselowski, Hamlin, when you're better than all those guys, I think you got to look. I wouldn't take Blaney as like an outright, but I would certainly look at him in head-to-heads if you get the right matchup.
See, I could almost make a counter argument at that, Andy. I almost think Blaney's a better outright than the head-to-heads. You know, we've talked about the inconsistency on the show. Well, think about it. He's as fast as anybody at times, but he also finds a way to finish 20th, like you said. You know, he's not consistent. Whereas Harvick is always top 10. Keselowski, Kyle Busch are always top 10, and they're not always the fastest. So 2 ways to look at that. And as you guys know, Blaney's a guy I've liked a lot since last year, and he's burnt me a few times with these head-to-heads for that reason, though. In fact, we looked at green flag fastest speeds last year in the fall. We talked about it here on this show. He was running top 1 or 2 for several of these races as the fastest car on the track. So I thoroughly agree with you on Blaney. I think, keep in mind, too, his worst track by far is Richmond, and that was 2 weeks ago. Talladega is a good track for him. He was running well last week, but it's a random race. So, you know, it's been a few weeks since we've had a track where Blaney could really shine. So I would not be surprised at all to see him do well this week. By the way, looking at the intermediate track since 2018, which lumps a lot of these different 1.5 miles together, we have 41 races going back to the start of 2018. So that's a pretty big sample. Once again, why this is such a great track to handicap. Kevin Harvick, not the best average finish, but he has the best driver rating, Rocky, out of all those drivers on 41 races. And Truex Jr. is second the best driver rating. And Blaney, I believe, is 6th. So he's up there, too, even though he's inconsistent. He only has 1 win, though, out of 41. Harvick has 8 out of 41. So it just shows the difference on finishing, even though Blaney's been very fast. Rocky, who's another guy who rounds out your top 3 for Kansas?
Got to go with the other number, the H, Denny Hamlin. Hamlin has 3 wins here, 8 top 5 finishes, 9 top 10s, and 25 races here in Kansas. Average finish 14.5 at this track. Despite a bad finish at Talladega, Hamlin remains the hottest driver the past 10 races with 8 top 10 finishes and an average finish of 7th. So I'm going to look for Hamlin to run strong this weekend.
Yeah, once again, he only has the 9th best driver rating the last 3 years on these cookie cutters, but he has 5 wins, which is tied for second most with Keselowski and Kyle Busch, by the way. And Kyle Busch has the best average finish with those 5 wins. So we've got Harvick, best driver rating, Andy. We got Kyle Busch, best average finish for the last 41 on these tracks. But we talk about how both of them have underachieved this year and going back to last year for Kyle Busch. Andy, give me another name that you're looking at here, maybe a top 3 contender or long shot, whichever direction you want to go here with Kansas.
Yeah, I'm going to save my number 1 driver this week for my free play. So I took out the restrictor plate race last week, and then I went and looked at the last 6 races, just kind of a little momentum type look. Now, most of those are short tracks. There was even a dirt track in there. But there was 2 bigger tracks, and Hamlin has the best momentum coming in. Number 2 is Joey Logano. And I do like drivers that are racing well or in the groove. Confidence is a big thing, particularly with the team. If your driver's getting good finishes, your team is feeling good. Your pit stops are a little bit more crisp and sharp. And Logano on those 6 tracks is second with finishes behind Hamlin. So I might look for Joey Logano to just race a little bit better than he has at this track. I don't think his finishes at this track really show how good he can be at these cookie cutters and 1.5 miles. His performance at other tracks rank way ahead of Kansas. I think it's only a matter of time before he finishes top 3, maybe even is there for a win at the end here. So I would look for a good finish from Joey Logano, who's coming in off some good momentum, who is probably going to regress a little bit more to his average of good finishes on 1.5 miles compared to what he has done here at Kansas in the past.
Yeah, and by the way, Logano, 5th best driver rating the last 3+ years on these cookie cutters. You know, so he's obviously very good on these tracks. But How many drivers would you say are having an off track when they finish top 10, 3 of the last 6 at Kansas with a win and 2 top 5s? So it's like he hasn't been awful here at Kansas. He hasn't been maybe as good as some of the other ones. So, yeah, I think some of that's just random variance. The fact that he has a win and 3 top 10s still in 6 races. Keselowski, Logano, Blaney, you're not going to go wrong with any of those guys this week, in my opinion. Keselowski, more of that head-to-head guy. As Andy said, he's the ninja. He found a way to win, leading 1 lap last week. He's very hard to go against in these head-to-heads. And it's interesting, guys. A lot of times I'll see Logano or Keselowski against Blaney in a head-to-head. And I learned my lesson last year. Blaney had the fastest car in a lot of those races, and he still finished behind those guys just because he's inconsistent. And that's another reason, Andy, I kind of think maybe an outright win with Blaney makes some sense because it's either all or nothing with a guy like that. Rocky, which direction you want to go here? You want to give us a long shot, a play it against? What else are you looking at here for Kansas?
Let's do a long shot, and this is actually a true long shot. Johnny sent us odds earlier this week. I'm going to mention Eric Jones at 300 to 1 odds. While Jones has not won here, he does have 3 top 5 finishes, 5 top 10 finishes in 9 races here in Kansas. Average finish 15.9 at this track. Over the past 3 years here in Kansas, Jones has 5 top 10 finishes in those 6 races. A very nice average finish of 7.7. So, like we say with the long shots, they probably won't win, but you can probably find some good head-to-head matchups with him. Maybe a top 10, top 15, good money line there. So look for Eric Jones to run strong this weekend.
It's so funny, Rocky. I was going to take the same angle for my long shot pick, and it's based on the fact that I was looking down at all the top 5s, top 10s here on intermediates the last 3 years. One guy that was kind of farther down but had some good numbers was Eric Jones. But I've got a different takeaway for my long shot on that, and that's actually Christopher Bell, because keep in mind, Eric Jones was in the 20 car for those races. He's at the weaker team now. Bell's the guy stepping into the 20 car in the stronger team, which is, by the way, Gibbs with Hamlin and Truex. We've already mentioned here in this segment as being strong on this. Kyle Busch, best average finish. So those are the 3 other Gibbs drivers that are with Bell on the intermediate speedway. So don't disagree with Jones, but I think some of that might have been the machine. I'm thinking Christopher Bell, with that same logic, could be a long shot for the same reason in the 20 car now. Andy, any long shots, play against guys you're looking at here in Kansas?
Austin Dillon every once in a while shows up on some of these big tracks. Even got a win on one of these a while back, and I believe he had a top 10 finish earlier this year. So he can. You're not expecting big things from him, but it wouldn't be a complete shock if Austin Dillon is somehow around the top 7 towards the end, if he maybe a yellow flag comes at the right time, or if they nail the setup. So Austin Dillon has shown top 10 potential at a big track this year. So it's 66 to 1, not the worst in the world.
Yeah, by the way, you're getting him at 14 to 1 for a top 3. You're getting him at 2 to 1 for a top 10. So you're still getting a 2 to 1 payoff on the top 10 on Austin Dillon. And let me pull up Eric Jones, actually, while we talk about him, because, I'm sure you get even bigger money on him. Eric Jones is at least 100 to 1, if not more, as Rocky said at some other books, if you shop around. 25 to 1 for a top 3, 3 to 1 for a top 10. So you're getting 2 to 1 and 3 to 1 on Dillon and Jones to be in the top 10. Obviously, those odds are cut pretty big there, but wouldn't shock me to see either one of them run well. Rocky, do you have a fade guy you want to look at here this week at Kansas? Maybe a play against guy, or do you want to get to your free head-to-head matchup? Is that part of it?
Yeah, let's get on to the free head-to-head matchup here. I'm going to look at Cole Custer over Bubba Wallace. Custer has no wins, no top 5 finishes, 1 top 10 finishes in 2 races here in Kansas. Average finish is 10.5 at this track, which is actually second best among all active drivers. He has finished 7th and 14th here in his career. Bubba Wallace, on the other hand, has no wins, no top 5 finishes, no top 10 finishes in 6 races here in Kansas. Average finish 28.0 at this track. Bubba's best finish here is 18th at this track. So looking at Cole Custer over Bubba Wallace this weekend.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it was a fluke finish last year, but Cole Custer made the playoffs by winning one of these intermediate tracks, and pulling it up now. Actually, which one did he win last year? It was Kentucky in mid-July, and it wasn't really a true dominating performance. He only led 5 laps in that race, but he did get a win on one of these types of tracks last year. And Kentucky and Kansas are pure cookie-cutter ovals, very similar setups. And yeah, I kind of had a feeling your play against Guy was Wallace. So that goes hand in hand, Rocky, as we've talked about that last week. Bubba's a fade until we see otherwise, and I don't disagree. Andy Lang, what you looking at here? You got any other guys you want to mention, or you want to get to your free play as well?
Yeah, my number one guy this week, Kyle Larson. I will take him to finish inside the top 3 at plus 190. He finished first and second at the first 2 and fourth at Homestead. So that's a first, a second, and fourth at the 3 cookie cutter tracks that they've raced at this year. And I like that he led 103 laps at Las Vegas and 269 at Atlanta. It shows he was great the whole race. Those weren't lucky wins, and that wasn't a lucky win and a lucky runner up. They nailed the setup on that car without practice. So I think they've shown they feel comfortable with setting up the car on the bigger tracks, and it's tough to beat first, second, and fourth. So to get plus 190 at top 3, I think is really, really good value. If he keeps the car clean, he's definitely going to be there at the end.
Yeah, I like it, and I purposely didn't mention Larson as we're going back and forth because I had a feeling he was coming. But yeah, he's at the top of my list as well. I'd say Denny Hamlin and Larson are probably my top 2 this week from what we've seen this year on these tracks. And keep in mind, Kyle Larson, we talked about Christopher Bell stepping into a better ride. Kyle Larson, of course, missed most of these races last year. He missed everything after the shutdown, basically, when he was fired. And he only has 4 starts versus 6 at Kansas the last couple of years, but he still has the second best active driver rating among everybody after Kevin Harvick at Kansas. And then if you take bigger picture at the intermediate tracks, he's top 2 or 3 in almost all the key categories that I look at. And that was with the weaker 42 car. He's now in the 5 car, which was Jimmy Johnson's team last year. And we've seen him just dominate some of these cookie cutter tracks already this season. Finished dead last at Talladega last week. He was basically out after like 5 laps. So, if you worry about momentum, I guess that's a concern. But I think we all kind of agree Talladega is a one-off. It doesn't really affect this race. So, yeah, Kyle Larson looks strong, and it's hard to disagree. And I'll get almost 2-1, Andy, is pretty appealing because if Hamlin beats him or if, like Harvick or one of these other guys has a good run, you still cash in that top 3, and he's run there consistently all season. So once again, Rocky Atkinson, Cole Custer over Bubba Wallace in the head-to-head. Andy Lang has Kyle Larson plus 190 to be a top 3 finish. Andy Lang at WagerTalk.com. His best bets will be posted this weekend. Also at Bump Sports on Twitter. Rocky Atkinson at sportsmemo.com. He's on Twitter at Rocketman Sports. He will also have strong best bets this weekend as he goes for his 100th NASCAR win over the past 3 years, hitting over 60%. Andy Lang hit right below 70 last season in NASCAR. He does golf, hockey, NBA, MLB props. Rocky does baseball, basketball best bets as well. Andy at WagerTalk.com, Rocky at sportsmemo.com. Myself, Steve Merril, will have baseball and basketball best bets this weekend at WagerTalk.com as well. And don't forget to subscribe to Wager Talk TV right here on YouTube. Don't forget also to leave a comment below. Let us know your top 3 picks this weekend. If you agree, disagree with any of the drivers we've mentioned. And also, please give a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this free content, it takes half a second to give us a thumbs up, maybe an extra 30 seconds to leave a comment. And it never takes much time to subscribe to Wager Talk TV so you get great free information each and every day. We'll be back next Friday night with more life in the fast lane right here on Wager Talk TV. Enjoy the race this weekend, and best of luck as always.